Michael Allen from Manpower. We are a national brand, yet locally owned franchise. We are familiar with the challenges businesses face. It's tough recruiting and retaining qualified employees. That's why working with Manpower is a smart, cost-effective solution. Our entire focus is talent acquisition. We'll manage your hiring and training and provide ongoing customized support. Since 1966, we have been your community-invested partner, uniquely positioned to help eliminate the hassles and save you time and money. Let us help. Contact Manpower today.
Hello and welcome to the Hub, powered by Manpower of Richmond, also in Portland and Newcastle. And I am your host, Michael Allen. And here on the Hub, we interview local businesses, community partners, and various special guests. And our mission is to share and spotlight unique and untold stories of companies, organizations, and people who are making a difference in our community. So today we have a rather special guest today. It's somebody I've known literally my entire life, and a special welcome to my dad, Mike Allen.
Thank you, my son, Michael.
So, Dad, currently you live full-time in Naples, Florida, and you're kind enough to come and visit for my 60th birthday this week. And we're just jam-packing your visit with golf and visiting with family and friends and the Manpower staff. And Kevin and I were talking several months ago about how it would be kind of a unique opportunity to do the Hub with you. And so I'm glad that we're getting to do this together today. So part of what I hope to do today is just kind of go over part of your personal story, kind of chronicle for our followers how our family business Manpower began in Richmond. However, before we get to that, I want to start with our Hub tradition. And every guest, we ask them about their very first job. And I think I might know what it is, but I'll let you share it with everyone. So going back several years ago, what was your very first job?
First job was at Wayne Dairy, and it was ice cream. And I was getting ice cream for people for I think 65 cents an hour. Okay. And it was downtown where Wayne Bank is located.
All right.
And so that was my first job.
So what was that, just like a ice cream shop? Or
it was like a soda shop, but people would come in and buy small pints of ice cream, and I would go back in the freezer and pick out whatever flavor they wanted and bring it in, and that's really all I remember. But I was 16 years old and making 65 cents an hour, and it was a great job.
Yeah.
I think. It was cold in that freezer, by the way.
Did you do that? Was that like a weekend job, or were you doing that after school? Or
yeah, that was during the summer, actually. Yeah.
All right. So it's during the summer. But so that isn't the job I was thinking about. I was thinking more about, you used to talk about the bottling, the Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. I thought you were probably thinking about that job, because I did that when I was in high school, and I was actually able to drive trucks around. I had to get actually a chauffeur's license, and had to drive the Coca-Cola trucks out on US 40 to their warehouse, basically around the corner. So that was my first job, and I guess you might say that seemed to be more important to me, because I was able to have a car in my senior year at high school. I was able to pay for my own gas, and I felt pretty cool driving around that 1956 Chevrolet.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more, about was it called the Richmond Bottling Company, or was it actually Coca-Cola?
Yeah, it was. They were, I guess it would be in franchise bottling company. The Witherby family that owned that, and so that's what I remember about it.
Right, and I remember. I'm not sure when they stopped doing it, but I can still remember. I mean, they would fill the bottles with Coke.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it was going through a conveyor line.
Absolutely, it was a bottling company, and it was very interesting, because I would unload 7 trucks at night. I can remember, and they were open trucks, and you had to take off these, and you would throw them on a conveyor, and a lot of times they'd be filled with other than Coke, because they're being returned all the time. They actually brought the bottles back in the trucks, and so we would load those off, and then we'd reload the trucks with new product for the next morning.
Was there? So it wasn't just Coca-Cola that was being bottled there.
Actually, it's all I remember. I don't remember anything except Coca-Cola. It could have been something else, but
it just
what I
always
remember.
seems like that's
what
all
I
everybody.
remember.
I think that's what everybody remembers.
I think
about it. So it feels a little weird asking this question because we know each other, but I guess I just like to, for our followers, just kind of go back, share with everyone where you grew up and, just, growing up as a child and where that all started. And
well, of course, Richmond has always been my home.
Mm-hmm.
I spent some time in maybe a couple other places that other than Richmond, but basically my full time in Richmond. And growing up, I remember to Pleasant View Junior High School,
Mm-hmm.
And went to Highland before that, and then eventually, and of course, Richmond High.
Right. It's funny because we had spoke to Skip Reynolds a while back, and he mentioned Pleasant View and Highland, and
Right.
And where were you living at that time? What part of town?
It was Williamsburg Pike, and it was right before they started to build Interstate 70.
Okay.
And so my parents had built a house, as you may remember, or no, you didn't. You were already told about it. But they built a house, and then here comes along Interstate 70, and they built a fence right in front of the house, about 15 feet from the house, and took all the frontage that we had going to Williamsburg Pike. So that was kind of interesting, and we had to find a way back out of the back property, another road to get past the access to the interstate.
Okay.
So that was the neighborhood, and back then they had a farm across the street. And I forgot about that. One of the first job I had was 11 years old, actually helping get hay. The farmer next door, and that was 75 cents an hour.
Right. Yeah.
That was a lot of money back then.
That
for
makes
a kid.
me think that when I interviewed Roger Golden, it was quite a while back, and his first job was like that. He was like picking strawberries. That was his job.
Why they let me drive a tractor 11? Because I could hardly reach the pedals, and after I'd knocked most of the hay off of the trailer, I didn't get to. That was my last day for that job. By the way,
that's what's kind of cool though about for people that work on a farm, kids that work on a farm, whatever, they're normally way ahead of the curve on driving because they get to drive tractors and stuff.
And I don't think OSHA was involved back then too much. I don't think I'd been driving a tractor at 11 years old.
Yeah, probably not. But I think the rules for out in the farm is a little bit different.
Yeah.
That area they were set. I mean, it's just hard to comprehend that Interstate 70 wasn't even there.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of people wish they were. There's plans to do some major renovations of 70, but it's pretty bad going from Indianapolis to Richmond these days. It's really bad shape.
Not a pleasant drive.
I suspect back then they were just all pouring concrete.
Oh,
yeah, just all concrete road.
Well, I can remember that. I think it was to. It was only a section. It stopped at Ohio line, and it went into Indiana maybe 5 or 10 miles. And we would get out and drive from the east side to the west side because there's four exits on 70. Mm-hmm. And it was for some reason that section was done. So that was fun to go out and take off and go from point A to point B and on the interstate. Thinking what it was going to be. That was kind of unique.
Did your parents, my grandparents, did they get any compensation from the state at all?
Oh yeah, they whatever I can't remember it was, but it was they did get compensated for the land they took from that part of the property.
Right. I'm sure it's not as maybe if they were doing it today. I bet it'd be a lot more money.
Yeah,
probably what they're given there because it's like, hey, we're taking this property and here's a little bit of change. And maybe they got more. I don't know. I mean,
no, I don't remember it being a windfall, as they say.
No, yeah. So and later, I mean, years later, that area where your parents lived, and then also, I believe my Grandpa Allen's his mom lived out there,
and grandmother Allen.
And then like the first couple years of my life, there was a cow barn or something that had been converted into a house or something.
Yes,
like
yes,
that.
it was. And that's eventually where I lived with you.
Yes.
You actually lived in that house.
Yeah.
If you called it a house.
Converted cow barn. and I think my mom or you told me once about that you could like hear the mice running in the ceiling or.
Yeah, it would be subject to small animals and rodents coming into the building. Yeah, to the house. Yeah. That was quite normal.
Some humble beginnings there. Later, Dana built buildings there. Isn't that the same property where Dana built their corporate or whatever headquarters or in that area? That's kind of where that was.
Yeah, they did. Uh-huh.
For those that would know that part of town, I mean, then, that all shut down, and then Wolverine was out there for a while. Now Wolverine's no longer there, and I believe another company has purchased that corporate building, and they have plans to use that for their offices and then lease some offices out. But that's interesting that's where that property was.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
It changed quite a bit.
Originally, it was a trucking company that was going to go in there, and that never developed for whatever reason. I think actually a bankruptcy evolved out of it. RMCD, I think, was the name of the trucking company, and they had planned to move from, I think, downtown Richmond out there, and it just never happened. And eventually Dana came in, as you said.
So chronicling after your, I'd like to kind of go through your work career. I mean, we talked about, scooping ice cream, getting ice cream out of the freezer or stacking bottles, but your first kind of grown up job was at
NATCO.
Okay.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to go to NATCO, and that was really only about 6 months. And then in 1964, I took a job at Wayne Works, and I was there for 2 years. And then in 67, actually 2.5 years, in 67, got an opportunity to go to Belden Wire and Cable, and was there for 6 years.
What did you do since you were there a little bit longer, what was your job at Wayne Works? What did you do?
The first job was I was assisting in all the different departments, filling in for vacations.
Okay.
So I was, and became a full-time job. Belden had so many long-term employees back then. You got to remember, they probably had, the number I remember is like 1,800 employees. It was just a major employer in Richmond. And so it was.
We're talking about Belden or Wayne Works?
Well, we're now already gone to, and we can go back to Wayne Works. If we go back to Wayne Works, I was in the scheduling department and help, and I would go and track all the buses from each department until they were finished. And then we would get a call from whoever had placed the orders, and when is our bus going to be ready for delivery? And so that was a job for my 2 years of my in that 2 year period. And then in actually spring of 67 is when I went to Belden Wire and Cable.
Okay, and that's when you were initially filling in for.
I was filling in,
people.
But they had people with up to 5 weeks vacation, and they had. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many parties they celebrated for people with 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of service at Belden. And they always had a big party. They would go down in the lunchroom and have a big cake, and they would literally almost stop production for everybody and bring everybody in to celebrate, especially when they hit the 40 or 50 years. And so with that many weeks vacation, they needed somebody to work full-time at that time. It felt like it was a part-time job, but I would go from department, where it was a wire mill or a cabling department, and help with the production and lining the schedules out for those weeks that I was filling in.
You probably really kind of learned everything about the company doing that, though.
Yeah.
Every facet of what they did.
And then eventually they moved the sales department from Chicago, and then I took a job for outside sales, inside sales for some of their distributors, and it happened to be West Coast distributors of Belden.
So you went in a little bit later because it was West Coast? I mean, what were your
Well,
hours?
when I took that job, and that was probably my third year into Belden, when I think it was like 1970. And so the job was from 9:30 to 6. And so it didn't matter. And it was a promotion. And I was happy to have the job. And it was, I didn't have to be outside in the factory. And it wasn't air conditioned in some of the areas.
Yeah, it was pretty hot. It was still pretty hot in there to this day.
I know. But anyway, so I was happy to get the promotion and was able to handle and enjoy the job of talking to the West Coast customers they had and distributors. And so that's what I did until 1973.
The technology's really changed since then. What were people using wire and cable for then? Do you recall what kind of cable was being made and what they were using it for?
Well, I mean,
or even were privy to that? Yeah,
I mean, really, what the cable that I involved was all specialty. So the customers some of the customers I had, it was custom made cables. You got to remember the computer was. And the computer chip was just being developed in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. So computers were being developed. But the typical, in any wiring cable, for example, all the wiring that used to go into slot machines, you forget, seemed like hundreds, almost 100 feet of wire in these big Bertha machines. And all of that was done by wiring. Mm-hmm. There was no computer chips. And eventually it changed, obviously, but during that process, anything that required a cable, any wiring, it could have been anything you could imagine. It took a wiring.
Power cords.
Yeah, sure.
Telephone cords of the handsets.
Yeah.
I mean,
Plantronics is another company they did originally, and they required wiring, same as we were hooked up now.
Yeah. Did do you recall if they did any kind of government work at that time? They were providing any products to the government for stuff they were using or whatever? Yeah.
Livermore Labs was one of the accounts in California, and so it required all kind of wiring, of course.
I mean, back then the computers were like a room.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they were huge. So Belden, that was until 73. And then that's when you went to California,
right,
for a few years, and
that was until 77.
Okay, and then that's when you came back here for Manpower.
Correct.
So that chronicles to you came to Manpower, but let's go back now and talk about the Manpower business and how that got started. So your mother, my grandmother, Geneva Allen, started up the Manpower franchise here in Richmond. But tell us a little bit about her career, just highlights about her work history leading up to the point that she became a female entrepreneur in 1966, which in and itself is pretty remarkable.
Well, my mother was born in 1924. I was born in 44. And you were born in 64,
right?
Okay, so things are quite changed. So what was amazing is that about my mother, which I think is quite unique. So she's in high school, getting ready to graduate, and she's 18 years old. And they announced that anyone would like to work for the FBI, that they're taking applications. So she applied for the FBI and was hired. And later on, she gave me a copy of the letter from J. Edgar Hoover that says, I want you to report at this location, Washington, D.C. Don't tell anybody where you're going or what you're doing. And so finding out about your mother was, I think, pretty cool and pretty unique that someone that young left this city for a job that she was, and I can explain more about what the job was for, but that was her first job. Mm-hmm. And so she left Richmond and eventually came back and But when she was there, she was doing providing documents of persons of interest for the FBI, and she actually ended up managing a group of 7 people in her division, providing these documents, and that's what she did. And then she eventually worked for the Red Cross for a short time, also after that, and then came back to Richmond, and then took an accounting position.
What was that? The guy's name that she worked for? Do you recall his name?
In accounting department, accounting. It was a CPA firm. I want to say Wilson is what I remember.
Yeah,
and that's been a long time ago.
I remember
obviously. That I think is
name.
what it is, right off of I think it was South A and North A and 8th Street.
Yeah. I kind of remember kind of the location years ago, that area where she worked.
Right.
What was interesting about her going to work, going back a little bit about the FBI was, I mean, they needed a lot of women to do different jobs during then because our country was at war.
Yeah.
World War II, and I mean, so the guys that she was in high school with, they were probably in the military. They were off the war.
Absolutely,
tons of them. So it opened up an opportunity probably for women during that time to do jobs that typically they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do.
Absolutely.
You think that's probably fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
sure.
that kind of helped catapult her into, I think, probably in a professional world, in a working world, where maybe it wouldn't have turned out that way initially.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the need for a college education or all those qualifications, if weren't required, they just needed people to go to work. That's the reason they had so many women in the workforce in manufacturing at that time. Mm-hmm. And
Rosie the Riveter.
There you go.
She was doing accounting. She was a public accountant. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how I don't know if maybe you even remember how she ended up obtaining that accounting skill. I mean, I don't remember.
That I probably also don't know. Although her mother, my grandmother, also did accounting. So it, somewhere along the line, it was passed on.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
Going back to my
grandma's parents, because they were really kind of unique and very interesting people. Especially granddad, your grandfather, Melvin Smith. We could talk all day about him. We just loved him to death. I mean, Vida too. He was more of a kind of a out front person than she was, but
right.
We could spend a lot of time talking.
Yeah, because
about
now you're
them.
going back to 1899 when he was born.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
I had a lot of stories about what about happened during his lifetime.
Oh yeah. But back to Geneva.
Okay, back to
so
her.
She was doing accounting, and I think she liked it because she did it until 10 days before she passed. She was still doing that kind of work.
Exactly.
In her 80s. But so from your recollection, how did it go from her working for this accounting company, CPA firm, or I don't know if they were CPAs back then or not.
Right.
But if that was the right term. But how did it come about, this whole Manpower idea for her? Well,
from the accounting, how did she ended up with her own accounting firm?
Okay.
And we have to kind of back into how did that happen. So what happened there is, unfortunately, she had breast cancer at 38 years old.
Okay.
So she had to go home and recover from that. Well, when she's home, she had some people call her and say, we would like to have you do our accounting even though you're home and recovering. And that was a unique opportunity because there was, back then there was no FMLA for any type of benefits for people that need to be home for several weeks or even sometime months.
Technology and surgery for breast cancer. I mean, her surgery was pretty intense.
Yeah, very, very major and
very invasive.
Exactly. So, and recovery time was much more. So, anyway, she had people come to her and bring actually work to the house, and so she worked until she's recover. She was going to go back to work for, let's say Wilson was the name, And they said, why do that? Why don't you start your own company and you'll be some of our first customers? And she was brave enough to do that. So she opened a small office on South 11th Street, right off of right there where Welling, I think it was, I want to say Welling Real Estate.
Is it Wayland?
Wayland, yeah, Wayland.
I always remember that. So even as a kid.
Thanks for helping me there, son.
Well,
I am a little bit older than you.
You know, remember that? You know how I remember that?
How's that?
Had a whale on their sign.
That's right, Whaling. That's right.
Wayland, and it was very kind of
Whaling,
cool how they built off of that name. They had like a big whale that was part of their sign. It was real estate insurance or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
And the other side of this, I think there was 4 offices. There was a barbershop.
Right.
And so there was 2 offices in the middle, and she opened her accounting firm there.
Yeah. So she was doing that. She had clients, and she must have been doing fairly well.
She did. She ended up. I remember quite quickly. She had like 4 staff members working for her, and she grew quite quickly. And within about 2 years,
so
the first 2 years.
Yeah. Would
that would have been 60. Now we're talking about 66 when she looks in the paper. Can you imagine the Palladium item? And she saw an ad, somebody with an accounting background interested in opening a temporary help service. And before they became better known as staffing companies,
right?
The word was temporary help. And so she had an accounting background. And here's a woman already had worked for the FBI, so she was not afraid to try new things. And so she answered the ad. She went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Manpower was founded in 1948. So the company was only 18 years old.
Right.
And the way they were expanding was through franchising. And so she decided I'll go check it out. And they found out what her background was. And she went, she trained, came back, and opened Manpower on September 21, 1966.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing. And so she started that, and at kind of around that time, I think that's when also you would have been at Belden, right?
Yeah.
Around that, close to that
66,
time.
I was, I was actually still I was at Wayne Works.
Okay. But then
in the 60s, so within 6 months after she opened the office, now I was at Belden.
Right. And you were working that 9:30 time yet? Or were you? No, that wasn't initially. That was kind of later.
That was until a couple of years later. Okay. But if you want to talk about my first job at Manpower?
Yeah, she had that. I mean, there's kind of 2 parallel stories. The business started, but, so I guess just share about you kind of helped out with the business, but tell us a little bit about, do you recall at all? It's so hard to go. It's a long time ago, but so she opens the doors. Do you recall about when she got her first clients, or how that started coming, that the work started coming in for the Manpower side? She already had established accounting business and staff, and that was going, but it's.
Well, being an avid golfer that both of us are, we like to golf. The first major job she had was helping put it in. They needed 20 part-time people for the fall of 1966. Now we're talking October, November of 66, to put in the irrigation system at Forest Hills, a new system. So she had an order for 20 people, and that was really, back then, that was considered a big order, believe it or not.
Oh, sure.
And so from there,
it's a good order today.
Yeah, that's right. We would take that right in a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, that was one of the first actually that I remember talking about. But it was one person here, one person there. There was a company called Wall Lake Door. They became a kind of a major account back in the early days. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of them was in also office jobs. And originally, one of the reason that Elmer Winter actually started Manpower, the story I remember, it was kind of interesting, which also kind of gives you an idea how did the concept started. Actually, his secretary she had major surgery. She was going to be off for months. And so he said, what am I going to do? I got to hire someone to bring in, and now I've got to pay the workers' comp, the liability insurance, make out the paycheck, W-2 at the end of the year. So how do I handle this? And he said, guys, wouldn't it be nice to let somebody else company find me a qualified secretary that I could call up who wants to work maybe only part-time, that does this and works for this company. And I just called the company and said, send me a secretary for the next 3 months.
Right.
And that's literally how Manpower started.
Right.
In Milwaukee in 1948.
Yeah, he identified a need and kind of came up with a solution.
Exactly, yeah.
And those early years, it probably was more predominantly maybe like office jobs, and then it got into manufacturing and industrial, which ended up being more of the sweet spot for staffing in later years.
Yeah, the whole spectrum of technical and then permanent placements also.
Mm-hmm. So, well...
So maybe I can back up a little bit. Actually, the first job I had was in 1968, in right after I had just had one. So it was 67 to start at Belden, 68 1 year. I had one week of vacation, and mother came to me and says, "What do you do in your vacation?" I said, "Not much. I don't have any money to go anywhere." She said, "Well, gosh, I need someone to unload a boxcar of lumber." And small town in Ohio, I can't remember now for some reason. Anyway, I said, okay. She says, and you've got a car, and you can drive these other 3 guys and do that for a week, because it's going to take a week to do that. And I said, that'd be great, because now I can have an extra paycheck for that week in addition to the vacation week. So it was just, and what else was I going to do? So that was actually my first job. And then in 1970 is when I took the new position at Belden and my job. And then my day started at 9:30. And then that's when she came to me and says, oh, by the way, why don't you come in and open the office at 6 and work till 9 and dispatch people to go to work. And then you'll have a half an hour before you go to Belden, and then you'll work till 6. And then once you come in on Saturdays and do the payroll by hand. And I said, well, that's great. Raising 2 small children, you and your sister. And back then, working 12 hours or working extra jobs was necessary, and I was happy to do it.
Just needed the money.
I needed the money and was lucky, and what better to work for your mother and learn some skills and accounting skills from her that I didn't have.
Right.
Doing payroll, and by then you had to open a book and say, okay, how much for taxes? No computers, no cell phones. It was a different world back then.
When people came, what was the office like back in those early days? Because I know the answer to it, but I think it's really interesting what it was like when people came in looking for work or whatever.
Well, you had a chair. You had about maybe 10, 12 chairs right in front, right as soon as you walked in. Mm-hmm. And then you had from here to you, there's a desk and another desk behind that, and I think maybe one more, and then the restroom. And it literally was like a hall. And so they would come in, and it was called, and back then they called the waiting room. Now you got to think about it. That's the way they operated. So they came in, they sat down, you got an order, and then normally the person who had a car was one of the first ones. That's just a pecking order. Who's got a car? And that was the first. Okay, you got, and they all maybe qualified. They all wanted to go to work, and a lot of, and these were mostly I was dispatching that early in the morning. People who were calling their office and said, we had 10 people absent. Can you send us 10 employees to fill in at this particular position? They were just general labor positions. So that's what we did. We would that's how I would dispatch these individuals to a different job. And sometimes I would drive them to the job, leave the office, take them there myself, and then come back, and then someone would help take care of position of filling orders while I was not there for those 3 hours.
So, and they were probably predominantly men at that time. They were just all guys coming in, sitting in chairs in the weight room.
Absolutely.
Probably probably smoking cigarettes.
Very common. Bringing in maybe their donuts we provided, actually, that was one that I think they came in for the donuts and coffee.
You had coffee.
I had coffee and donuts, and it was they enjoyed that. Even somebody get a job. They were just happy to be there, be inside warm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were these? Do you think some of these guys were kind of people that were kind of down on their luck or whatever, or just happened to be unemployed? And I
think it's just people trying to get into the labor force, and maybe they had lost a job, maybe they were laid off, or maybe they had lost a job for not being there on time, or too many absenteeisms, or it didn't know the case. So we just took the application, and regardless of what their situation was, and back then, maybe we didn't have all the knowledge and to find out, obviously, what their total background was.
Right.
But as long as they were willing and go to work and performed well, and the company wanted them back, then that helped build their career to get in another job. In a lot of cases, the companies, as you well know, end up hiring a lot of our staffing employees because they were dependable, they went to work every day, and they wanted to have a full-time job eventually.
There was a short period early on in the franchise's career where grandmother was trying to make it work, and I don't think it was really going that well for her initially, from my memory. And I think she called Elmer Winter, the founder, and I think, if I got the story correct, she had called because she was concerned about even keeping it going. Is that correct?
She actually I had a letter that said, it's things are become difficult, and I forget, it was probably 68, maybe, or somewhere around there, and they said, well, we think the economy is going to turn around. You're talking about during the Vietnam War, there's just a lot of unsettled issues going in the country. But anyway, so they encouraged her to continue on, and she did, and glad she did.
Did that somehow coincide with that Forest Hills job, or was it not?
No, I think that was actually the Forest Hills job was in '66.
Okay,
so it was a couple years after that when there was just a tough time, and I'm thinking whatever that was, because you remember, a lot of people don't know, we cash flow, and I think it must have meant anything is probably cash flow, because when we at Manpower, as we bring in someone to work, you pay them the next week.
Right.
The customers may not pay you for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 60 days, and sometimes 90 days. So you have to have basically our inventory is our receivables, and you have to have cash flow. So be able to manage cash flow. I can remember having to go to the bank and actually trying to get a line of credit for $40,000, and was not easy. Yeah. And it was difficult. And so we did have some help from some nice banks in town that able to look forward and say, you know what, we'll take that chance and do that. But before you needed that cash flow. Without the cash flow, you couldn't survive. And I think that's what she was struggling with. But we were able to get through that period of time.
Right. And for any new business, having, you haven't had a chance to accumulate any retained earnings or any profits or whatever to try to help. Because ultimately, through the time that we've worked together, it's always been trying to set back retained earnings to cover your receivables, so you're not borrowing. Right. You hope to be in a position to do that. Right. It's not like, you make money, you just bring it in and, I got all this money. There's a little bit more to that. People maybe don't realize that you're covering that. And so, just to be able to like you said, just to have the cash flow to be able to pay your staff and pay the employees,
pay your overhead,
the rent, everything.
Your rent.
Yeah. So you were in California, and it was in 1977 that that Grandma contacted you around that time,
right?
And so, kind of walk us through that conversation, and which eventually would bring you back to Richmond,
right?
So.
Well, when I out of the blue, Walt Perman owned Control Master Products in Concord, California, called and said, "Would you like to be my sales manager?" So I was inside sales, and to me, it gave me an opportunity to do something much different, and maybe hopefully have some more skills to develop from sales. So that's what got me out to California from 73 to 77, and things were going crazy and booming in California. It was nice. I covered the whole Bay Area, and Tahoe, Reno, Carson City, Napa Valley, Monterey, Carmel. So it was like, this is really different from Richmond, Indiana. And then all of a sudden, Manpower is growing, and she called me up and says, "Oh, by the way, if you'd like to come back and manage the Manpower office, it's grown to the point where I need your help." Her accounting company had also had grown. And so I said, well, do I want to leave California, but for family reasons and coming back to this area? I mean, you got parents, you got grandparents. And I said, I think that would be an opportunity I don't want to pass out. I feel like I'm going to pass out right now. Anyway, so pass up that. I said, yeah, I'll come back and do that. And obviously I was very glad I did. And that was in March of 77.
Right, yeah, because just to clarify, for our followers, you and my mother had divorced, and you were in California, but Debbie and I were still here in Richmond.
Right.
So that, and so we were here, your parents were here, your grandparents were still here,
right.
Your sister was here,
right?
Still, whatever cousins, whatever we may have had, they would have been here. So there was like no family connection whatsoever in California,
right? And when I said come back for family reasons, obviously you and Debbie were here, and I wanted to be more part of your family. I brought you out to California. We talked all the time, but those visits weren't maybe once a year.
Once a year, and maybe
and then
holidays.
I would so it was limited. So I wanted to be more involved in your life, and so the combination of coming back and was high on the list, and then having a chance. She said, "Well, you can come back and conventionally manage and maybe own the company," and so. We're a sub-S corporation, able to transfer stock to me and eventually buy her out by 1990.
So working, how was that transition coming back? I mean, she was running things, and now all of a sudden, you did know the business. You had been around it. You had dispatched people. You had helped with payroll, and it's not like you knew how the business worked.
Right.
But what was kind of that transition like coming back, and the office? Where was the office then? Was that out on Was that on the northwest side of town at that point, or not? I don't recall.
We were still down. on 11th Street
in the even in 77. Okay.
Yeah, and then we moved to on the west side of Northwest 5th Street, and. So we were there until 94, and then went to the second floor of Wayne Bank and Trust.
Yeah,
when that was built.
The believe it or not, we've been in our current building for 30
years. 30 years this year. Yeah, that's hard to believe.
There at the 500 East Main, longer than any other location, and probably will never move from that facility, I would think.
Yeah.
So the transition in 77, what was that like coming back and working?
Well,
with your,
I mean,
with your mom?
I was, it was a kind of a ferry, and it was just totally different in California, obviously, in the Bay Area. It was a transition, but being next to my son and my daughter and family and my parents and my grandparents, it was also good to be home, and enjoyed that very much, and never regretted coming back.
When you came back, did you just kind of start visiting clients, trying to know who the contacts were, what the business was?
Part of being comfortable sales that I did. And I was not afraid to knock on a door and explain our services and how they worked and what they particularly needed additional staffing for, because they were growing their company, because they were losing, like, for example, Belden. I mean, a lot, because they had so many long-term employees. As they lost employees, how do they replace those people? Do they bring in new people full-time immediately, or do they bring them in part-time and then eventually see if they want to hire them? Or did they just have an uptick in business seasonally that created that need? So that was my job, obviously, to go out and explain how those services maybe could be needed or was needed based upon what the company was doing, and whether it be back then roses. We used to be the rose capital of the world,
Right.
And that's a seasonal job, and they don't need full-time people. They wanted people to come in maybe sometime for weeks or months to do some of the work. And like, again, another one of the big companies was Wall Lake Door. All of a sudden, during the building season, they would need extra employees, and they would have to staff up sometimes 20, 30 people a day additional. And also for people vacations and holidays that took people out of the company, and they needed people to come in and fill for those. So that was my job, to go out and hopefully knock on those doors and find out where those needs were and hopefully fill them.
We've worked with a lot of great companies over the years, and there's been just changes, ebbs and flows of how they approached staffing their companies, whether it's through their own means or through using hopefully Manpower.
Right.
I think one of the companies, though, that was a really a great, and this isn't discounting any other company we work with, I'm trying to say, but when I think of just my knowledge a little bit about a company that really was a kind of probably helped our stability, would have been Colorbox. Do you believe that to be a true statement? Or?
Well, that was interesting because Colorbox came to town, I'm going to say 1972, so about a year before I went to California. And Jack Creech was one of the managers and owners. And he came to me, and they had just come from Ohio and moved into where they're still located on G Street.
Yeah.
And he needed 5 employees. First 5 employees went in the company. He wanted to start from scratch. He needed some help. He didn't have the staff. He didn't have the personnel. He didn't HR department, obviously, anybody here except himself. And he was sent here to open the company and get it going. And so we got the first 5 employees there, and I remember having that small little handwritten order for these 5 employees, and then from there it grew substantially over the years, and then when I came back, and obviously the company we got to be very involved in the company and help staff them in a lot of cases for a lot of their full-time employees.
Right, they did well. For those that maybe don't know that Colorbox name now, is Menasha now, and still work with that company even today.
Right.
And but they kind of had a unique way of ordering, didn't they? I mean, at least a part of the time that I remember, where they would actually call in the order every day. Right?
Oh yeah. They'd say, okay, we need X number of employees. It could be 5 or 10 or whatever the number would be. Yeah, every day. And so you would have to dispatch those people for first and second shift, and so it was a challenge, but that was what we did. That was how you could grow the business, and the service was provided, and you could get a call sometimes at 6:30 in the morning for people in first shift, and then the afternoon, and then sometimes at lunch. Well, actually, they had 3 shifts, and then you'd get a call maybe at 10 o'clock at night and say, I need somebody for third shift. That became a challenge.
Yeah,
but that was still our job.
Yeah, that we did that so many years, and that's really not part of the business today, which I think is probably healthy. I mean, to call somebody in the middle of the night and have them get up and go to work.
Now we try to prepare people and say, what shift do you want to work? And they say any shift. Well, that's because they want a job. Now the question is, have they had any sleep so they can go to work? And in most cases, people kind of geared themselves. Yeah, I'm going to prepare myself. Maybe you're going to call me tonight. And a lot of people expected to be calling because they probably had, let's say, had a spouse or someone that was working day shift, and they had the only job they could maybe was able to handle because of childcare back then. They would take the night shift and wanted to. So, in a lot of cases, they would be preparing themselves and getting enough rest so they could go to work on third shift.
Yeah, in today's world, though, I mean, there's still a lot of companies that require a pre-employment drug screen.
Mm-hmm.
We want to run a background check on people. There is onboarding that people will have to do. I mean, there's employment verification, and the onboarding today includes like different safety training that they have to do before they're even allowed to be out on the floor. I mean, just through developments in safety and just the way you put people to work, it's just not, people don't get thrown into a job anymore.
Exactly right, yeah.
And it's just changed. And it's probably overall for the better. I mean, it's, sometimes it'd be nice to be able to, if you were a company needing someone right now, to be able to call and get somebody in there, but it's hard it's a challenge to be in that position to do that today,
right?
With all the stuff that people need to know or do before they show up for a job.
Yeah, today they call it vetting. It's like everybody wants everybody. You hear it all the time. Has this person been vetted?
There's any other. So you came in 1977, took over running thing. Any other kind of just noteworthy to share? I mean, there's been ups and downs in the economy all through these decades.
We've seen ups and downs and recessions and downturns and upturns, and shortly after coming back, of course, things were really were pretty good in the late 70s, as I remember, and then clearly as we got until 78, 79. Into the Carter years, and not getting political, but things got to be a little tough, and then of course Reagan came in, and up till 82, it was some of the lowest years that I can remember. Actually, in a part of 82, there was myself and one other person in the office,
right?
And so it wasn't until the spring of 83 when Reagan started going to create more jobs, and remember they were building back the military at the time, but that spurned all other types of job opportunities and growth. And unfortunately, you'd hate to think we spend so much money in the military, but unfortunately, that's just the way the world is. And that was one of the things that turned the economy. And I can remember actually it was March of 83. Like somebody in Richmond turned the lights back on, and then we started back again. So that was kind of I always remember that time frame of ups and downs in the company, and that was tough, but we got through it.
Yeah, I mean that's in 82. That's when I graduated college, and in hindsight, I really wasn't ready for an academic career at that point, but it really didn't go to college full time at that time because there really wasn't the finances available to go. I remember I was 17 when I graduated high school in May of 82, and I turned 18 in August. And that's where, I had worked. You helped me get started when I was at, you you passed on the tradition of it's good to work, I've had different waves of maturity during that time, but you kind of helped me get into mowing some yards in a neighborhood that you lived, and I did that, and I worked fast food for a while at Burger Chef, but then and then I remember the times where you'd let me come and sweep the sidewalks at the office or shovel snow or things like that.
Yeah, that was fun.
But then in August of '82, that's where you gave me the opportunity to work at Imperial Products, which making door thresholds, and that was another nice business that we worked with for many years. And so that was my first experience in a manufacturing environment, and I don't know if I can't remember not liking it, or I don't remember disliking or liking it, but when I look back now, I'm very grateful for that opportunity to do that job. I really look back now with fond memories of doing manufacturing, and then also worked some time at Color Box as well. But those I really maybe there's the times where you were trying to encourage me to go there, I wasn't always maybe too excited about it. But now I'm so thankful that I got to do that, because it gave me an insight into the manufacturing world, and it also gave me insight of what it means to be a manufacturing worker, and how that's not always easy. And I think it's served me to help understand more of the people that I work with, even to this day, so I'm really thankful for the opportunities you gave me there. So
well, let me tell you about, before we get off that subject,
Sure.
let me tell you, of course, the fun thing about our memory together is and about working. And of course, my dad said, nothing's ever going to become good of it. It'll become good if you don't go to work. Nothing good's going to happen if you don't go to work. So I said, well, gosh, I better go to work.
Yeah.
We had to, buy food or have a car or have a house. So that was pretty simple. So hopefully I passed that on to you and your sister, and got that from my parents, obviously. But besides Imperial Products, the fun job is it was that summer, and I needed someone to work second shift at Color Box, and I knew you could run a tow motor. I had some skills that I said, yeah, I think you could do that, Michael. So I put you on that job, and you were working for a while, and he said, well, Dad, I'd like to meet you for breakfast at Alsop's. And I said, okay. So we went for breakfast, and you said...
now AJ's.
And now AJ's, yeah. 16th and Main. And said, oh, by the way, I don't like working second shift. And I said, oh, you don't? And he said, no. I said, I like see with my buddies and go out, that's during the summer, we're all hanging out at night. I like to do that. And I said, well, Michael, unfortunately, you're the person I need for second shift. You can run a tow motor. I don't have anyone else. So, unfortunately, you don't have a choice. So you looked at me and said, okay. So that's the way that went.
But yeah, I mean,
obviously I was, trying to be as kind as I was, but I said, son, I really need you to do that job. And I know you want to hang out with your buddies, but I really need you. So you got to do it. And you sucked it up and did it.
Yeah, I talk all the time. I run into people about working there, and did drive tow motor, but also worked on it was hot down there, and I remember working on the end of a corrugator, and all these sheets of cardboard would come, and things have changed so much ergonomically, but you get all these stacks of cardboard, then you flip it up and you balance it on your head. I guess say this microphone.
Yeah,
and then you bounce on the head, and then you threw it for these two pieces of boards to help you stack it up, and then you would push it down the conveyors. And now, like, a lot of that stuff is just automatically done for you. These people don't understand what it used to be like.
Yep.
I remember
Hands-on.
There was a period of time down there. It was so hot, and I literally would go home and I could wring my shirt out. It was just so saturated with sweat back there. And I'm surprised I didn't get skinny. I've never been skinny my whole life. But I'm surprised I didn't lose tons of weight that summer because, man, it just would physical labor and sweating and everything. But, I definitely appreciate those times. And so I went eventually through, just some trial and error and some whatever with college. I did end up at Ball State in '85 and finally kind of turned things around for myself academically. And there was times, I don't go through the whole story, but my academic career was pretty spotty for the first 3 years out of high school. But I really appreciate the fact that you really never gave up on me. You knew the importance at that time of youth education was important, and even though that it was a challenge, you were still trying to encourage me to go on and on. And but I remember going to Ball State. For their followers here, when I went to Ball State. My wife and I, not my girlfriend at the time, fiance Beth, we both decided we're going to go to Ball State. I don't know if you remember this. So my wife is excellent academically. She's to this day she's extremely intelligent. And but so we both apply and she gets accepted. And I don't know if you remember, they told me no. Sorry. They said, sorry, we don't want you. And it was because my grades were so bad. My GPA was 1.729. I'll always remember that number because I had horrible grades. I'd gone to school at 3 different places and just totally immature, unfocused. And so I don't know if you recall, but we got into the car and we went up to Muncie and we talked to admissions, said, hey, is there anything we can do here?
Yeah.
So they said, okay, we'll let you in next quarter. We're going to make you sit out. If you really want to come, you can come. You'll be on academic probation. And that was hard because my wife was planning on to go to college with me, and she had to go to Ball State alone without me.
Yeah, right.
And that was a really just difficult time for me. It was somewhat humbling and humiliating, but it was definitely a learning experience, and I thank you for not giving up on me. But anyway, it was I bet you said, hey son, if this doesn't work out, I'm just not sure what. I don't know if you remember that, but it's just like maybe you just have to come back and I give you a job here at Manpower. Yeah. Ironically, in 1990,
right.
I came back and started working at Manpower. Yeah. It wasn't out of necessity though. It was a choice. So it was a little bit different. It would have been out of just circumstance. Right. But so I don't know if you remember much about us meeting and decision to come back and work in April. It was April of 1990 when I came.
Yeah, I mean, barely having that conversation, and I think at one time. You had different aspirations or ideas of what you wanted to do in your life, and again, the company was in a growth period. Your sister had already started for Manpower, and so here we had the 3rd generation working, and it just felt like a natural opportunity or transition if you wanted to consider it. And obviously, I'm very glad you did.
No, I'm glad I did too. I mean, it's really, there's different things I thought I wanted to do, and through, I'd say, God's providence, he led me back to Richmond and into Manpower, and here it is, 34 years later for me. And you started in 77. I started in 90. I believe my sister started in 86.
86. Yeah. Let's say 86.
And so we've had, and at one time, all at one time in the building, we've had, my grandmother, your mom, you, me and Debbie, and your sister Paula. We were at one time, all of us were in the business together.
Right.
Grandmother passed away. She was doing all of our accounting and staff payroll, whatever. And ironically, my wife was a CPA, just like my grandmother and had an accounting background, and she came into the business to fill that void with grandmother's passing, and now she's been in the company and been a great asset to the company as well all these years. And so it's been great to have be part of a family business and to work with family. It's definitely at times challenges like there would be for any job that you do.
Sure.
You know, but all in all, I thank God and I thank you for just the opportunity to do all this. And you know, we're talked about the ebbs and flows with the economy. I mean, really after COVID, it's had a big change on business, and it has had a profound change on the staffing industry overall. And it's been interesting to try to find different ways to try to provide services to our clients. And it's still this learning process and trying to find ways that we can help different companies. And it's just not all today, you know, just providing temporary workers. It's companies
totally
that
different.
use this in all kinds of ways for full-time positions, for their recruitment process. And so it's definitely still changing to this day. And so it's been really wonderful to be a part of it. I don't know if there's any things that you want to share or talk about that we maybe thought we might discuss that we haven't talked about.
And I mean, you brought out about the transition, and my mother died on 11/11 of 08, and I believe Beth started 11/19 of 08. So literally, we just had to say, you know, what do we do for accounting? And so she came into the business, and so you know, it's been a celebration of I guess family working together, and I guess the appreciation that I have that my mother was able to do what she did at I think extremely difficult time for her life, and go through all that, and at the same time provide the opportunity for the community and the surrounding counties that we've serviced for almost 58 years now. And it's always been satisfying to see people accomplish what they want, whether it could have been for working for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, and eventually full-time for the companies we serve. So that's always been very satisfying. So it's been a job that you enjoy because you saw people being successful. And in some cases, they got a second chance and maybe even a third chance when they came back and they didn't perform well, or they didn't go to work every day. And we said, well, we got to take you off this assignment. And they came back and said, you know what? Like we all do, we make mistakes. We want to improve ourselves. We want to get better at what we do. We grow up a little bit and mature. And some of these people came back to us, and it was the first place they came back, and they said, well, it didn't work at XYZ, but I really would like maybe this job. I see you have an opening over here at this company. Could you consider, let me go there? And we would sometimes feel like a counselor, just saying, well, you know, Mike, you got to go to work every day. You got to be dependable, and I think there's going to be a great opportunity for you. And anything we can do to help you get started, again, let's give it a try. And it was always rewarding to see that. It was, and so I think that was one of the things that you kind of forget about. You know, you're there. You got to make a profit to grow. You got to provide opportunities for your full-time staff employees, and you want to also be one of the things I almost forgot when my mother opened the office in '66. That was when the Chamber of Commerce started. Became from the group of 100, and she became a member, one of the first members, charter member of the Chamber of Commerce in 1966, because that's what she believed. And so she passed on some of those important values that hopefully we always thought about, and a lot of companies in our community feel is necessary to help support your community.
Right. It's been interesting through all these years. I think we would be a disservice if we didn't mention it, but I mean we've had family, we've worked together, but we've really had a tremendous amount of people work for us over the years.
Well, we still do, and we just had one of our employees celebrate his 30th year with our company, and they have become like family. We enjoy being with them and doing events together with them, and sharing the joy. Hopefully, that it is working in a company and the satisfaction they get from doing the things that I just discussed about, and that's helping people find a path to their career or having another opportunity to do something they always wanted to do.
Yeah, we've had a lot of staff with long tenures, and it's so appreciative for all the work that they do, and they represent us well and the company and the community well. And so shout out to all of you. If you've worked for us before, work for us now, we appreciate you so much. And so. Well, Dad, this has been great to get to do this. I think we'll probably wrap it up. We've been going a little over an hour. So.
Okay.
Well, maybe we'll have to do a part 2 in our 60th anniversary coming up in a couple of years.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But thanks for coming on. People ask me all the time, how's your dad doing? How's he doing? And, so I said, oh, he's doing great, whatever. So hopefully they'll get to hear on the hub how you're doing and get to see you this way. But so it's been great to have you here, and appreciate you and love you very much, and so happy you could be here and to do this today. So.
Love you, son. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks.
Okay.
Michael Allen from Manpower. We are a national brand, yet locally owned franchise. We are familiar with the challenges businesses face. It's tough recruiting and retaining qualified employees. That's why working with Manpower is a smart, cost-effective solution. Our entire focus is talent acquisition. We'll manage your hiring and training and provide ongoing customized support. Since 1966, we have been your community-invested partner, uniquely positioned to help eliminate the hassles and save you time and money. Let us help. Contact Manpower today.